I am Julie Szmyd. I'm host for this room and club. So as we get started, just a few clubhouse pointers. You can use a little plus sign, as Christine and I were just talking about at the bottom, to ping others that you think may be interested in conversation into this room. And you can use the search bar to narrow. If you have a lot of followers, especially, you can narrow down to people who might have data or data economy in their bio, or an emoji that might relate. Make searching for people a little bit easier. Definitely be sure to follow me, all our moderators, panelists, and co-hosts here today. You'll want to check out others and follow them in the room as well. And anyone that has a little party hat next to their name, those are new Clubhouse members, and we encourage you to follow them too. Additionally, we love to expand the conversation, so please raise your digital hand if you're in the audience and you would like to participate. We'll do our very best to get to everyone. Additionally, to support those using closed caption, please state your name when you begin speaking and state your name again at the end. So I would say, this is Julie, and then at the end, this is Julie, I'm done speaking. Please note our club is called Consuli Conversations. In addition to this room, we host a long COVID and a clinical trials room. You can learn more by following our club, Consuli Conversations, which is at the top of this screen with the little green house. You can see our upcoming rooms listed there. And then be sure to follow me. I'll ping you into future rooms if you'd like that. For any direct questions, comments, feedback, suggestions, if you want to join our panel again or recommend anyone. I love hearing from you guys. My email is in my bio, as well as our socials. Please follow us there as well and learn more about us. For those that don't yet know Consuli, broadly, Consuli is a public benefit company with a mission to enable individuals to participate in the data economy. Experts do suggest our individual data is worth about $20,000 per year. So we help people take control and choose who gets access to and how their personal health information is used, and if and when desired, get them paid for their data and make medicine better. We do this by operating a marketplace for members where we become their agent, and our members receive smart-matched, individualized offers from us for opportunities, including to participate in things like clinical trials and data trials. There is no cost to join our movement. You can learn more about us at consuli.net, consuli.net. Again, that's in my bio, so you can check it out there. It's now my pleasure to turn the floor over to our room moderator, Elizabeth Dreicer, who is a philanthropist, activist, and co-founder and CEO of Consuli. Elizabeth will be introducing our distinguished panelists and guests. Elizabeth, over to you. Is Julie?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julie. And thank you to you and Arca and all the others that made this room possible, our panelists. Welcome. We're happy to host and facilitate this room. I also, just before I introduce our panelists, I want to make mention that we've been having this conversation for quite a while now, at least the last few months, and along the way we've been gathering the information, really thanks to Julia, who's here. We've been gathering the information and have developed a public Miro board, which you can access if you click on my bio. You can see the link in there. But broadly, some of the big questions that have been discussed, and this is certainly not replete, but these are relevant. And that is, things like what kind of, quote, property or quasi-property should personal data be? What makes people care about data in the way that affects behavior? How do we qualify rights between individual privacy and societal progress? How do we even measure or quantify value of data, to any individual? And, what is true consent? What kind of alternatives exist in that realm? So these are just some of the peppered questions that have emerged. And of course, we've talked about all other aspects, de-identified, mechanisms like blockchain and all the mechanisms that may be emergent to, keep data both private, but also to address the issue of how we deal with this new ownership framework. So Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our guest panelists. First up, we have, and I'm just making sure we've got everybody. Yep. First up is Gil Ruiz. Gil is a senior advisor to Senator Gillibrand on matters of tech, health, homeland security, and arts policy. He has worked with the senator for over 5 years and previously had experience with Georgetown University's Global Social Enterprise Initiative at the MacDonald School of Business and with AARP. Gil has handled high-profile legislation such as the Data Protection Act, which we're going to hear more about, which would create a data protection agency. Gil is passionate about the potential for technology to be a force for good, and he believes that the battle for civil rights in the digital age will center around the right to privacy and our collective understanding around data dignity. It is now my pleasure to turn the mic to Gil. This is Elizabeth, and I'm done speaking for now. Gil, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. I'm Gil. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. It's great to be here again and having more discussions around data dignity. I see more participants and more people interested, and I've seen the term data dignity, continue to manifest around me, and whether it's in the media or in conversations, and it's really exciting. I've certainly been really stimulated by the things that we've talked about here, and have taken a lot away. Looking forward to another productive conversation. So, as Elizabeth mentioned, a lot of our work is centered on the Data Protection Act and our Data Protection Agency, which you'll hear me weave in and out of here. And we're also doing some work around government data and what we're calling government data stewardship, as well as some of the little things on worker privacy and more. So, looking forward to what we talk about today. This is Gil.
Thanks so much, Gil. Next up, I'd like to introduce Andrew Young. Andrew is the Knowledge Director at the Gov Lab, where he leads research efforts focusing on the impact of technology on public institutions. Among the grant-funded projects he has directed are a global assessment of the impact of open government data, the development of a set of recommended principles and practices for the responsible handling of children's data in humanitarian and developmental settings, and designing and testing a methodology for leveraging corporate data to benefit the public good. Andrew has authored or co-authored a number of extended works on new approaches for improving governance with technology, including the books The Global Impact of Open Data and Open Data in the Developing Economies. His writings can be found in Harvard Business Review and Stanford Social Innovation Review, among others. And he tweets at _Andrew Young. It is now my pleasure to turn the mic to Andrew for his opening remarks. This is Elizabeth, and I'm done speaking.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. This is Andrew here, and I'm delighted to be here. As Elizabeth indicated, I am coming to you from the Gov Lab, where our work really focuses on how to improve people's lives through the use of what we consider to be two assets that are increasingly available to governing institutions of all types. I always point out that we're very intentionally the governance lab rather than government lab, recognizing that different types of institutions make different decisions that can really impact people's lives in a number of different ways. But we really focus on these two assets of one being people and their skills and their expertise, and new ways that technologies can allow institutions to better tap into that capacity and that type of collective intelligence of the crowd. And then, surprise, surprise, given the focus of this discussion, the other asset that is increasingly accessible to these institutions is data. So we really think about ways that we can increase the systematic, sustainable, and responsible use of data and reuse of data in different contexts to create new public value, improve people's lives, and improve the way that we make decisions in different contexts. So eager to tap into a number of different elements I'm sure will come up during the discussion, from our work around building a social license for data use and reuse, ways to think about the life cycle of data and how different risks and opportunities can emerge over time, the specific considerations around children's data and the additional duties of care and different types of risks that could emerge, and then other potentially more esoteric kind of issues that might come into play, such as things like group data and statistical data and the risks and opportunities involved in those kind of elements. So delighted to be here and eager to learn from everyone else in the room. So this is Andrew, and I'm done speaking.
Thank you so much, Andrew. We're so happy to have you. And I'm looking forward to the dialogue. There's a lot there, and a lot you guys have been working on, so great to have you. All right, so next up, I'd like to introduce Sylvie Delacroix. Professor Delacroix focuses on the intersection between law and ethics, with a particular interest in data and machine ethics. Her current research focuses on the design of computer systems meant for morally loaded contexts. She is also considering the potential inherent in bottom-up data trust as a mechanism to address power imbalances between data subjects and data controllers. You can see more about her work at datatrust.uk for an overview. Professor Delacroix has served on the Public Policy Commission on the use of algorithms in the justice system, and the Data Trust Policy Group under the auspices of the UK AI Council. She's also a fellow of the Alan Turing Institute and a Mozilla Fellow. I am now turning the mic to Sylvie. This is Elizabeth, and I'm done speaking for now. Sylvie, I think you might still be on mute. Okay, Sylvie, as soon as you're able to come off mute, we'll come back to you. I guess that we'll move on for the moment and then come back to Sylvie. I see her here, but it seems like we're not getting her off mute. So we'll come back to her. All right, so next up, it's my pleasure to introduce Susan Aaronson. Susan is a research professor, cross-disciplinary fellow, and director of the Digital Trade and Data Governance Hub at GWU. The Hub trains policymakers and public in digital trade, data governance, and data-driven change, and does research on national and international data governance and data-driven technologies such as VR and AI. Susan is a... Sorry about that, Susan. I think I'm getting a lot of crosstalk. So Susan is a senior fellow at the Center for Governance Innovation. She's the author of 6 books and numerous articles on trade, data, human rights, and corruption. On a personal note, she enjoys ballet, triathlons, and screwball comedy. So thanks for that personal note, Susan. I am turning the mic to Susan now for her opening remarks. This is Elizabeth, and I'm done for now.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing well. Here in Washington, it's really hot. So, as Elizabeth said, the Hub is part of, I think, a larger movement to make sure that policymakers and the public have a good understanding of how data is changing our world. And we find a lot of times that it is quite the struggle to get them to understand the difference between a social network and an app, let's say. And so as part of our efforts, we also have separate grants to better understand data governance. And so we've been mapping the governance of public, personal, and proprietary data. And obviously public data can include lots of personal data. And next year, we are coming up with a metric of what comprehensive data governance looks like. What does it include? Is there a feedback loop between citizens and the government? And does the government hold itself to similar standards, for example, for the protection of personal data? And given the fact that these rules are so different at the national level, I think we all should be deeply worried about the failure to find common ground on data governance.
Thank you for your opening remarks. I'm looking forward to digging in more. Next up, and just FYI, Sylvie, if you end up getting your mic off mute, please just interrupt me and we'll hear your...
I am unmuted now, sorry about that.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Thank you so much for being with us. I'll turn the floor over to you for your opening remarks. This is Elizabeth. I'm done speaking for now.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, so Sylvie Delacroix here. I have not unmuted myself, and I'm basically here to share some of the experiences. Well, we've been trying to build data trust, first in the UK, but now this is very much an international project. And I know that in the US, data co-ops are much more popular, or at least known. So data trust, just in a few words, it's all about bottom-up empowerment. So how do we empower groups to pull together the rights they have over their data, to acquire a voice over how their data is used and for what purposes. So it's very much about bottom-up empowerment. And what's special about data trust is that it comes with special built-in institutional safeguards. I'm not going to say more than this at this stage, but it is related to what some of you may have heard. You may have heard of data co-ops, for instance, with Alex Pentland. It is related in kind, it just comes with different levels of safeguards.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you so much, Sylvie. Appreciate your opening remarks. And I'm also looking forward to hearing about how you guys are approaching data trust. That said, I'd like to now introduce our next panelist, Parker Nolan. Parker has worked with major academic institutions, regional healthcare systems, commercial IRBs, and private physician practices in establishing research compliance programs. Considered a pioneer in the use of AI in research compliance and IRB operations, he is frequently asked to speak about how to design cost-effective compliance. Currently a director at Prime IRB, he's also the founder of Advantage Research Services based in the Washington, D.C. area. It's my pleasure to turn the mic to Parker now for his opening remarks. This is Elizabeth, and I'm done speaking.
Hello, this is Parker. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that introduction. I'm very excited to be here. I enjoyed these conversations. They raise a lot of questions, and I think they're conversations that need to be had. This is Parker. I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Parker. So next up, we have Linda MacDonald Glenn. Linda is the founding director of the Center for Applied Values and Ethics in Advanced Technologies. The acronym is CAVIAT at Crown College at the University of California, Santa Cruz. She's a recovering attorney, but also an ethicist, futurist, and educator, as well as advisor with over 30 years of experience in a variety of sectors, including exponential technology, healthcare, government, education, business ethics, and futures forecasting. Linda, we're delighted to have you. I'm turning the mic to you for your opening remarks. This is Elizabeth, and I'm done speaking for now.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for having me here. At the Center for Applied Values and Ethics and Advanced Technologies at Santa Cruz, our vision is to create a more just, equitable, and viable future for everyone. And so many different questions. I'm so excited to be a part of this group and discussing it. To me, some of the big questions are how do we make sure to create a regenerative economy? How do we fold this into a regenerative or circular economy? But also, how do we classify data, because it doesn't traditionally fall into this category of property as most people think about it. Most people have a title to their car or perhaps a title to their house, and it's fungible. But one of the things, as you know, Elizabeth and Julie and a few others here, we've been talking about how do we refer to this personal digital data, digital persona, and what are the characteristics. So thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of this. You have the resources of the center at here for you, and I'm looking forward to our discussion, and I'd like to welcome David Koepsell too. Elizabeth, were you going to go ahead and introduce him, or shall I?
Oh, I'm happy to introduce him. I've got his bio here. So, yeah.
Great. Okay. All right, then I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce him. And this is Linda, and I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Linda. And thanks again for being with us and being such a great thought partner in the university and the students that are also involved. I just want to say thanks on behalf of all of us.
My pleasure.
Thank you. And next up is David Koepsell. David is an entrepreneur, author, philosopher, attorney, and educator whose recent research focuses on the nexus of science, technology, ethics, and public policy. He's provided commentary regarding ethics, society, religion, and technology on MSNBC, Fox, The Guardian, The Washington Times, NPR, Radio Free Europe, Air America, The Atlantic Journal, Constitution, and the Associated Press, among others. He's been tenured Associate Professor of Philosophy at the Delft University of Technology, Faculty of Technology, Policy and Management in the Netherlands, a visiting professor at UNAM, and a number of other universities where he's been Director of Research and Strategic Initiatives, including at the Comisión Nacional de Bioética in Mexico. Apologies for that if I mispronounced. At any rate, he's the co-founder and CEO of Cryptogen, a venture partner at Impact Rooms and Research Associate Professor at the University of Buffalo, Department of Philosophy. It is now my pleasure to turn the mic to David for his opening remarks. This is Elizabeth, and I'm done speaking for now.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and hello to everyone. I'm a Clubhouse newbie, so if I get the etiquette wrong, please forgive me and correct me. I am, as you mentioned, I'm an attorney and a philosopher, and for the past couple of decades I've been working on issues of property rights and intellectual property rights to data, and ethics of all of the above. Considering certain technologies such as cyberspace, nanotechnology, and most recently genomics. I'm interested in addressing the problem of the rights to control and direct the use of data while ensuring ready availability of things like plentiful genomic data, in the case of our company, for research. And recently I've been thinking about it in terms of the notion of sustainability and thinking of data as an ecosystem. And I'm really excited to join this group and hear your thoughts about these issues and to contribute whatever I can. This is David Koepsell, and I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Really glad to have you with us. And I see that Alan's not quite yet with us, so we'll introduce Alan Butler when he arrives. But next up, it is my pleasure to introduce Kirsten von Reisfeld. Kirsten is the founder, CEO of People with Empathy. Kirsten is a leader in bringing a critically needed patient perspective to cutting-edge medical innovations. She's committed to providing patients with chronic and rare diseases with the support they need. She works with patient advocacy organizations, industry representatives, and individual patients and their loved ones. She personally is living with a rare and chronic disease, and she believes that the only way to ensure health equity is to leverage one's own data. As a patient involved in Stanford's human-wide program, she speaks on the benefits and advantages of precision medicine with a special interest in pharmacogenomics. I will leave the rest to Christine to introduce herself. I know she's quite eloquent. Christine, it is our pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for being here today. And I am turning the mic to you for your opening remarks. This is Elizabeth. I'm done speaking for now.
Thank you, Elizabeth. This is Christine. Thank you for having me. And in addition to all of that you talked about, I am also a rare disease patient. I live with rare disease and multiple autoimmune diseases. I live in Silicon Valley. I was born and raised here, but also no longer able to afford to live here or really even live at all. So I survive on SSDI and Medicare, which has provided me opportunities that many don't have. And I've seen the benefits of data in my own health, but also have seen how my data has benefited so many of your companies. So I've helped build and advise on products and involved in conversations around data from the patient standpoint. And I'm looking for digital rights to my own data and I see the digital age as really just being the largest distribution of wealth ever. And I want to make sure that those of us who contribute also prosper. So to me, my data is like my song, and if you want to play it, you have to pay for it. So that's it, and I'm Christine.
Christine, thank you so much for being with us, and I'm going to remember that. My data is like my song, and if you want to play it, you got to pay for it. Okay, that goes down in one of the greatest hits, pun intended. All right, thank you for being with us. All right, and next up, I'd like to introduce Cody Hill. Cody is the Executive Director of the Data Union and Head of Growth at Upstate NC. A former product leader at Facebook, Cody decided to leave big tech after being exposed to the mounting negative externalities it was causing for normal people. He left to co-found Upstate NC, a state legislation tracking platform, and now is Executive Director of the Data Union. The Data Union is a movement founded to advance the cause of giving value back to individuals through use of their data. It is a collection of experts and resources where people can learn what's going on in the complicated space of data privacy and stay on top of legislative matters. Cody, I am turning the mic to you for your opening remarks. This is Elizabeth, and I'm done speaking for now.
Hey everybody, this is Cody Hill. Thanks Elizabeth for the introduction. So I'm Cody Hill. I'm the Executive Director of the Data Union. And I guess I'm coming to this from the perspective of I was product leader at Facebook for about 3 years, and about a year ago I ended up quitting and moving back across the country to North Carolina. It just ended up being a situation where I think I saw too much. I saw kind of how outmatched normal people were in terms of understanding what's going on with their data, understanding the tremendous amount of value that's being essentially taken by and being kind of sold and resold in various ways that most people are not aware of. I think a lot of people kind of generally understand that, quote unquote, big tech has my data. What am I going to do about it? And a lot of people, that's kind of where they're at. They don't really know a lot of the things that are kind of available, a lot of the legislation that is being talked about. So at the Data Union, what we're doing is just trying to inform more people and get them out of the mindset that, there's nothing else that we can do. So I just kind of want to help change the conversation around and kind of disentangle all the kind of complications between things like data privacy, identity protection, kind of all the different facets that this whole conversation encompasses. So I'm just trying to educate and eventually influence legislation because, that will only happen in time once enough people are kind of better informed and able to make a clear voice to our legislators as to what would be best for people. Happy to be here and be part of the conversation.
Thank you so much for being here, Cody. We really appreciate it. And luck, there's a policymaker representative here with you on the stage. So opportunity to share what we need to do from a policy perspective. Obviously, I think we're benefited by them being here and showing what's already happening, but also I think they benefit from hearing from us about what could be necessary and could advance the objectives broadly for people particularly the public policy angles. All right, so next up I'd like to introduce Alice Rathjen. Alice is one of the early pioneers of computational biology and spatial analysis of genomes. She is a serial entrepreneur in genomics for nearly 2 decades, having launched Dominga, the first direct-to-consumer genetic testing service in 2000, and DNA Guide, the first genome browser for mobile platforms in 2009. Her SlideShares presentation on precision medicine have exceeded 50,000 views. She's previously won the Kaufman Award for Women in Science and Engineering, and you can follow her at DNA Times. Alice brings to DNA Compass her passion for patient-centric data and building federated genomics infrastructure for delivering consented genomes at scale. Alice, we're delighted to have you with us. I'm turning the mic to you for your opening remarks. This is Elizabeth, and I'm done speaking for now.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And we'll have to work on shortening that intro since you've got so many on the panel. But I appreciate the chance to participate.
Oh, you were perfect. I think it is wonderful, and you've done amazing things. So thank you.
So I love this notion of data dignity, and for me the question is at what level do we solve it on the web? And currently my interest is to look for groups that are attempting to create a legal definition of a digital human being. Something like once a data set hits a threshold of uniquely identifying 1 in a trillion individuals, and that data would then need to be treated as a human domain, and that you can have lots of human domain registrars, but that the data would have to be pulled out and treated almost like it was like a website that someone could move, and it would be based on real-time consent. And then one last, I just think that human beings currently don't exist on the web. Companies do, and that the domain structure seems to be critical to that. So what I'm hoping is that we could see some legislation that starts with forcing the CLIA labs to serve as human domain registrars or biological domain registrars with that raw data being available as web services with real-time consent for portability to the patients. And that's Alice. I'm done speaking. Thanks.
Wow, Alice, you did it in a very short window, but you packed a big punch in terms of ideas. I really want to thank you for expositing those ideas here, and really, really interesting. And definitely, perhaps the beginning of I'm going to switch my beginning opening questions, and I think, let's go around the panel. Thoughts about Alice's proposal. And I'll open it up if you just want to take yourself off mute if you're on the panel. Please feel free to do so. And let's dig into that question. I think under the current, we also heard from Linda speaking about that. So Susan, I think I see you off mute. Would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I agree with you. Beautifully phrased and nice to meet you, but impractical. Because if you look at polling data as to what people say they want in terms of data protection and data and informed consent and what they do, there's a huge gap. That's thing one. Thing two, unfortunately, I think we have to have a natty state in terms of data, in particular personal data. And just because people are so busy, and even with health data, which is, I understand is crucial, especially to people with autoimmune diseases or fears of COVID, I think it's going to be very, very difficult for informed in-time consent. I love the idea, but I still think you have to have strong regulations. I don't think tech itself, innovations, will solve the problem of adequate personal data consent. Thanks.
Yeah, I would agree with you that those that, especially don't have the energy necessarily to get up to speed to manage the data themselves. But that can be resolved by allowing people to pick a trusted guardian for the data as a way of working around that.
Can I weigh in here?
Absolutely, Kristen, please.
With autoimmune issues, and I actually agree with you, Alice. I think it does need to be, we have so many companies and so many interests right now that are moving into the precision medicine space, who are taking this genetic data from people, and products and therapies are being built from this. So I do think there's a way to work it. I do think tech has to be involved, because really it's just the only way that it's going to work. But really doing it with the interoperability, and as a patient, I see this happening in the future. And really, Alice, I know there are ways around it, but it does take those really deep conversations that really involve all stakeholders, which I don't think we have. But that's just my comment and my perspective, and I'm Christine, I'm done.
Linda, I see you came off mute.
Yes, thank you. There certainly are hurdles to overcome, but I think we can overcome. Yes, tech needs to be involved, but also there needs to be some policy intervention too. And one of the basic things that we ought to discuss is, what is it? Healthcare data is sort of its own special category, but to a large extent, there are certain parts of your digital persona, call it what you will, that you cannot protect. I mean, things that, for example, from the Bureau of Vital Statistics, your birth date, your death date, but what is being collected is a lot more than that. So how do we identify the characteristics of what we are trying to protect? Maybe we can come up with a list, because my birth date, my death date, marriage, things like that, certain things are in the public record, and we're not going to protect those. So what is it exactly that we are trying to protect? Our browsing data? Anyway, I just wanted to open the discussion up for that.
Yeah, another really good addition. I see Susan, and then Christine, and then Sylvie. So I just want to invite you guys to take the mic. So Susan first, then Christine, and Sylvie.
Thank you for those thoughtful points. I'm deeply worried about the loss of human agency. Right now I'm writing a piece about what is bad capitalism in the data space, right? And one example is, many of us wear smartwatches, but it's very difficult for even the smartest people to predict the uses of a technology and how it might be misused. And I think this is particularly true in the healthcare field. And we've seen this play out with COVID-19, with contact tracing apps, etc. On one hand, I see a contradiction in my own work, in that what I'm trying to do is help humans achieve agency over their own data. But the truth is, we can't really understand how technologies will be used, and there are just so many bad actors in this space. I almost think online people forget what is malevolent behavior. And I'll just give you a quick example of this, and this would be malware, spyware, disinformation as a service. These companies are selling these things around the world, and who would have predicted that? Okay, I'll shut up now.
They're very, very useful comments, and I appreciate the intellectual honesty of what you're grappling with, and I think we're all grappling with that. Christine, the mic is yours.
So I have a little bit of a different perspective, and I'd rather not protect my data. I know in this industry we have HIPAA and we try to protect things, but I see a lot more of an advantage in the collective data with everybody. And really, I think it needs to go to, what is really, that question of what is it, or what are we really trying to protect? I'm not sure, because I think as a patient, I benefit off of the data that is gathered from other patients. I see companies that are benefiting off of the data, and I know a lot of companies look for hard medical data, but we're not seeing the amount of data that's collected in other areas of a patient's life that could help them, really. So, I don't know. I just think if we look at privacy and what we're trying to protect, really, what are we trying to protect? Because I'd like to know who's out there and what they're doing, and I think transparency is a huge thing. I'm Christine, my perspective.
Elizabeth, if I could chime in.
David, I think Sylvie's next, and then we'd love to have you chime in. Sylvie, the mic is yours.
Thank you. I think it's the perfect time actually because Christine, we just had the latest 2 interventions for me encapsulate exactly why we need to change our frame of mind when we think about how are we going to solve this mess? Basically, there are several problems at stake. The first one is, yes, we are vulnerable. Yes, when we go online, we leak data on a daily basis, and none of us have either the time or the resources to really understand what's happening to our data. And so that's the vulnerability side, where in my view, we need basically intermediaries, just like we need doctors and lawyers. Today, I think it's very hard to assume that someone has the capacity to meaningfully consent to all sorts of data transactions, and that's why we need, I think, trusted professionals. But that's one point. The other point that I loved from the intervention from Christine was to say, well, yes, that's all very good to talk about vulnerability, but what about these important common goods? Effectively, there are many things that can't be realized unless we share data, including, for instance, better health outcomes. And so that other perspective, the fact that we, for the moment, we rubbish at sharing data, and we can't do a much better job than we currently do. I think what's problematic is that at the moment, these 2 problems, vulnerability on one hand, and we need to share data on the other hand, they're too often separated, as if you find a solution to one, you necessarily drop the other. And I think it's really high time we come up with governance structures that can tie together those 2 objectives. And so I'm not here to advocate data trust or other things. For me, this is part of a wider discussion about the fact that we need top-down regulation. Yes, we need rights, otherwise we're just pawns. But we also need bottom-up empowerment structures. And that's where we really lack it. There's no bottom-up infrastructure at the moment. So we need to create institutions, but they need to come from us. And that's why I think it's exciting at the moment. There are many philanthropic organizations in this space that are interested in launching and supporting, but are at the moment risky endeavors because nobody really knows how these work and what they're going to do. So data trust is one model, data corps is another, data commons, etc. But it's really important, I think, that more people become aware of what's possible in terms of bottom-up empowerment structures and how we can really put together these 2 objectives. Vulnerability on one hand, protecting, and then better sharing of data means data is valuable when it's shared, not when it's kept in one little box. Yeah, I'll stop here.
Thank you, Sylvie. Really great points also, and really speaking to some of the issues and thorny issues that need to be tied together in a governance structure. And I am going to tag Gil after David because I'd love Gil to address this issue of consent. Is that even the mechanisms by which policymakers have created these opt-in consents? What's the efficacy of that really? And can sort of guess that I'm somewhat skeptical by my question, but would love to hear him also chime in. David, I'm going to turn the mic to you. Thanks so much for waiting, and the mic's yours.
Thank you. This is David. So I wanted to echo Christine's concerns. So, in science, there's tons of data that's very well de-identified and useful in science, and there is a balance that we need to strike between our concerns about the misuse of data, which, they exist, but I think more concerning is the profiteering from data without inclusion of the subjects that really bugs a lot of people. So, I think there's a theoretical and a practical problem. One is that there is no framework in which you can assert ownership over data. Modern intellectual property laws are rather historically unique. The notion that you can even exert a monopoly over expressions is relatively new. So we'll need to think carefully about how we frame any new rights we might choose to enact and through legislation over data and the extent of that and what that really means. But also practically that in doing so we don't foreclose significant parts of science and the economy that depend upon the use of otherwise available non-harmful data sets for science and industry.
Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate those comments, and I think that is precisely this conversation and precisely pulling together all of the thought leaders in the space with the objective of us making progress on those very important things. I wanted to tag Gil. Would love to hear sort of the congressional perspective.
Sure.
The mic is yours.
Yeah, thank you. This is Gil. No, I think that's this is one of the chief reasons that we believe in the DPA and believe in making sure that we have an enforcement body that's ready to receive problems in real time, new and upcoming tech legislation. But there's also looking out for the individual consumer and has their back, right? We don't expect people to, opt into the safety of a toaster when they buy it and plug it into their home, right? We don't expect people to, opt into, whether they want to be contaminated or not by some incinerator, down the street from them. We have clear rights to environmental health and an agency dedicated to enforcing those and holding companies accountable when they violate those rights or defined harms. Our Data Protection Act defines a privacy harm. It defines what high-risk data practices are. It defines what data brokers are. But it's not prescriptive as far as, banning facial recognition or banning this or that, or setting really prescriptive rules as far as what flies and what doesn't, because we recognize it's a dynamic and changing field. Every day there's new data problems that need clearing out, but that need clever balancing from private sector to public to the individual consumer, and that's what the DPA is all about. We're the only OECD country without it. And not beyond these civil rights harms, the economic harms as well are well documented. Look at Privacy Shield. Look at anything like this that requires a certain framework to begin with, or any starting point. We don't have a starting point in the United States as far as what privacy and what data, what we can expect about our privacy when it comes to data, how much it's worth. We can't even start to have that sort of conversation because we're all coming at it from such different perspectives. I don't expect Congress to agree on that anytime soon. And in the meantime, that's why we believe the DPA can start getting to work right now, transferring existing privacy authorities from across government and start enforcing and applying, and bring rulemaking and guidance. You all may have seen some of the coverage of, the California law recently. And I think that's what we can expect, a similar sort of, flat rollout if we pass even the most comprehensive and strictest data privacy rules in Congress right now without a DPA to interpret and enforce it. It's sort of toothless, it's meaningless.
Thank you, Gil. Appreciate the perspective. And just before we leave that, DPA, Data Protection Act, just for acronyms for our audience, and then also, what's the prognosis on DPA? Can you give us your crystal ball? How's that going?
It's going really well. I think it's going really well. But I'm the evangelist on it. It's my job to convince you all that's happening. It certainly has had a more interesting reception than even a year ago. When we first introduced it last Congress, and the most interesting change has been from the private sector. A lot more medium, small, even the big, even big firms really interested in what the DPA can do for them. You look at the battle like Epic and Apple, right? It'd be great to have a referee in the room, someone to say, hey, look, this is what the standards are. Not that the DPA is coming in to fix all antitrust and competition, but there are certain questions there about what a security standard is, what privacy standards are, how much data is being utilized by Apple versus how much Epic could be utilizing data, and the DPA has a broad mandate to inform investigations like that, and so we're building coalitions with civil rights groups. National Action Network and Color and Change are big supporters of ours. Who are huge in the civil rights community. But we also have some really strong. I mean, Alan Butler from Epic, who's going to join our call here. Epic's this has been Epic's main mission for many years now, and they've been a really great partner for us. And we're having great conversations across the aisle. I mean, I've sat down with many Republicans at this point. Some that you might call controversial, like Senator Hawley. I sat down with his legislative director a few weeks ago, and some others to discuss some of this, because the senator, really wants to figure out a bipartisan way to do this, so we don't leave any stone unturned in that regard. And it's been an interesting conversation, but the data privacy, the data privacy on Capitol Hill and in Congress right now is so convoluted. It gets so hung up on the usual big snags like preemption, private right of action. And things like this that I have found that the enforcement conversation has been left behind, and that's what we're trying to fix, and that's what we're hoping can also be bipartisan and can have big support. The Commerce Committee and its members obviously have really strong and developed opinions right now and legislation, and there's a lot to work with there. So we're finding our place in a lot of those existing things, but trying to build new coalitions and partnerships across the board too. And so far, so good.
Well, I'm glad to hear that it's progressing. So in terms of ETA, like timing, when do you, again, I know I'm crystal balling it, but I'm just trying to get a sense for, well, at least those of us in America.
Well, no, I mean, my crystal ball has been broken for a few years now, but sometimes it flickers on. It depends on you, the people, I would say, and how much you all want data privacy legislation and to demand it from Congress. That's Congress is only as good as the people that it represents. And right now, I would say, the pressure doesn't seem to be on enough. I mean, clearly we're still coming out of a pandemic. In some ways, we're still in the midst of one, right? And it's tough to turn attention and urgency and priority to something that can be so nebulous as data privacy, right? I think we all understand that, and it feels like there's so much more urgent things on the table, even though this is as urgent as ever, right? And that's why we're all here. But we need to hear that politically, and so far we're definitely crescendoing towards it, but it hasn't hit that fever pitch where we have congressional leadership saying we must put this on the floor now, right? And that's where we need to get to, and I think that's why we're doing this and building that awareness, having more conversations and making people more knowledgeable and therefore empowered as to what they can ask for when it comes to their data.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And I'm sorry to ask you 5 ways.
Oh, you're fine. I tried to weasel out of it, but you got me. You nailed me. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. I think I saw Andrew come off mute, and then I think I saw Susan come off mute. I don't know if Cody, I apologize, I was not really doing as good of a job of following the mute button. So if anybody would flash their mic if they'd like to, from our panel. I think I see Christine. So Christine, I'm going to turn it to you. I see Cody. So Christine, I'm going to turn the mic to you first, then Cody.
Sure. Mm-hmm. This is Kirsten, and Gil, I love what you're saying, and one of the things that I think people don't realize, so I'm on Social Security disability, and there are so many people on Social Security disability with no way to survive and basically draining our system, but there is a chance. You can give them a purpose by giving them digital rights to their data and giving them something that they can contribute to society. So I think it's an interesting thing that as we're looking at this, is that this could potentially be a way for these people who cannot work. We have insurance tied to jobs right now, but you have a whole population of people who have never been able to work. So giving them a chance to share in the ownership of their data and potentially, have a purpose in this life could be a motivating factor for a lot of people. Anyways, I'm Christine, my perspective.
Thank you, Christine, and I'll turn the mic now to Cody. The mic's yours.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to weigh in on what. Well, first off, I really liked what Sylvie was saying around kind of the bottom up and the top down approach. I don't think that just legislation is going to solve it. I think that there needs to be a kind of consensus understanding of like what is actually going on with companies that use our data. How is it being used? And not only that, but how is it being more and more smartly and more specifically being used? Like each month, like all of these big tech companies are full of incredibly smart people who are working very hard to come up with new ways to basically monetize you as a person and everything that you do online, like all day. That's like all they think about. And so it's really interesting. So I think that we just need to be telling like better stories to the people so that they fully understand kind of, quote unquote, how they're being used. I like to think of anytime you're typing into your computer online or you're swiping on any app, anything that you touch that is connected to the internet, think of that as that you are filling out a survey. You are continually filling out surveys of literally everything that you do. And having been inside an organization like Facebook, and you see just all the teams that are all very hyper-specific on each type of individual action. What does a swipe up mean on something? What does a swipe up and then kind of swipe back down so that you are like maybe interested in that? I like to think of it as, if you see a therapist, I kind of think of your phone as like you are being constantly monitored by 100 of the world's best therapists at all times, and they're using that to kind of monetize your actions and your thoughts and your mentality as a person and kind of who you are and how you think and how you can be best sold to different organizations and agencies. And so I think that a lot of people kind of get caught up in the muck of data privacy or like what can I do, or big tech already has all my data. So I'm just, and it's convenient, so I like it. But I honestly think that in order to kind of move things politically, you need to get people on the same page and really understanding just the tremendous amount of value that they're providing just by honestly surfing the web, looking at social media, kind of doing their normal everyday activities. I don't think that we've done a good job of really kind of fleshing that story out, because that's ultimately what's going to move the needle politically, is more people with a more unified message as to, hey, we want to participate in this huge amount of value that we are creating. So that's kind of the thoughts I have on that.
Thank you so much, Cody. And I see Susan took yourself off mute, and I'm going to give it to you in just a second. I just want to mention, this is the time we invite anybody in the room to please feel free to raise your digital hand. We'll try and get to your questions and or comments as well. Susan, I'm turning the mic to you. This is Elizabeth. I'm done speaking for now.
Thanks so much. This is Susan. I'm going to have to go pretty soon, but if I could build on what Cody said. So I do a lot of examination of public opinion to get a better, not that is exact, right, but to get a better understanding of how the public sees this. And I think about that in light of the fact that, our personal data is a value, our privacy to ourselves as individuals, but our data is collected in groups. You and I are not aware of the groups that we are gathered into, whether it's by income or neighborhood or political persuasion or how much we spend each year. And so a focus on privacy as opposed to collective harms when we're grouped is problematic. And I do think that if people understood that without our consent, we're being grouped into groups to make all sorts of decisions on credit, on policing, on things like that, I think people would have a better understanding of the complexities of this. And I worry that our approach to this in terms of regulation I don't want to see the digital economy stifled, but at the same time, I do see what I call a lot of evil misuse of our data. And I'd be curious to know if other people here think transparency would help. I just cite as example, this economy has been in force since 1997, and it's not just Google that has collected tons of our own data related to our browsing habits and our political beliefs and our search inclinations. It's also Target and Ford, etc. So I just wonder, if we could find out more about the types of data that they have on us through, for example, corporate governance rules. Right now, the U.S. requires firms to report on their cybersecurity, how they protect our personal data, which they store. Why not? What data they have and how they plan to monetize it. Okay, I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this. Thanks.
Susan, really great comments, and I want to turn the mic to Linda specifically to address the corporate governance question, because I know that her organization's been thinking about that a lot. So Linda, if I can ask you to come off mute and take the mic, and then we will get to Carolina, who's waiting. But Linda, the mic is yours.
Thank you.
I'm done speaking.
Susan, certainly what you said resonated, and thank you for that. One of the things that we're trying to do at the center is we've created a tech ethics review board, which is helping to set minimum standards in terms of corporate government with regard to ESG, environmental, societal, and governance issues. So I certainly welcome input on that, because right now there are no minimum standards, but I think certainly great place to start would be with what you said, Susan, within having transparency and disclosure as to how that information is being used. And anybody who's interested in that, please, I invite you to reach out to me through my ucsc.email. And in fact, David and I have had some discussions about how the policy needs to be formulated. So I think that is a good discussion to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I really appreciate that. I knew that you'd have something to say. And I just want to acknowledge we got another panelist, Chris Chang. Chris is the founder of Tech Talks Global Community Clubhouse, which is the largest tech-focused club. He also works for global cloud server infrastructure provider as the head of business development in the U.S. Chris, welcome. We're in the process of dialoguing, and I'm going to give the mic to Carolina since she's waiting, and then Chris, would love to have your opening remarks. Carolina, the mic is yours.
Hi, thank you for such an interesting discussion. I just wanted to have a short comment to build on Christine's point. I recently stumbled into an interesting concept, and that's the economy of incentive, which defines currency and what people are willing to take actions for in exchange for and talk to different patients, and in some way patients would want a reward for their information, and they should have it. And I've worked in pharma also, and I know it's against compliance in every single way to give incentives to patients. So for me, it's that is the issue that's black or white. How can we get into that gray zone and make it work for both parties?
Thank you, Carolina. Christine, I might have you also weigh in there. I'd love to first turn the mic to Chris just for some opening remarks. And then, Christine, I'll come back to you. So, Chris, the mic's yours.
Hey, thanks for having me. I actually came in a little bit late here. I was putting some fires up at the job, but this conversation is super duper important, and unfortunately I missed a lot of it. But thank you for the nice introduction. I'm here to listen and learn, and I will chime in whenever if there's something I can add to the conversation. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Chris. Glad to have you. Christine, what about Carolina's comment? I know you might have something to say.
Well, I love it first because I actually work with her. She's my co-host on Thursdays for my own room. But it is really, we talk about incentivizing health for everybody but the patients, right? We talk about healthcare providers. We talk about pharma industry. Everybody gets some sort of payment in what they're doing. And, I'm a conference speaker, when we were in conferences. And one of the things that people used to, we used to talk about was the fact that all of the patients that were at these conferences were there doing this for free. I'm on Social Security, so I can't take money. And yet, as an industry, we've taken advantage of that, right? And yet, here I am still living on Social Security disability, knowing that all of my data is going to build your product. Now, most people and most patients don't realize that this data is going to all of this, but they will be aware of that eventually. And coming up with everything with Facebook and the data being out there, this is also going to be a huge topic. And what I see moving forward is that patients are empowering themselves. They are going to realize how much this data is worth, and they're going to combine and at some point hold their data from people that aren't working in their best interests. So it'll be interesting to see, but I'm Christine, my perspective.
Thanks so much, Christine. I appreciate that. Anybody else on the panel want to? Yeah, Andrew, I want to give you the mic.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth, and so much of what has been said has really resonated with me. Just a few quick thoughts. First, related to the really important points on incentives. I think that kind of also ties back to some of the challenges around building a data responsibility kind of approach fully around the notion of consent, because we often see, especially in humanitarian or development type of context, but also in health context, the incentive for consenting to data collection or data sharing is that it's a requirement in order to receive certain types of services. A case in point would be examples where people seeking to receive food aid are required to share biometric data in order to receive that aid. That might be consent in name, but I wouldn't say that is a particularly responsible approach. So I think that one of the important components that we advocate for at GovLab around data responsibility is also recognizing that there are different principles or good practices that come into play in addition to consent, not as a replacement for. So thinking about things like proportional data collection and proportional data retention and storage, and how long information is held over time. What's the minimum viable data set that can answer a particular type of question or deliver on a particular type of purpose is something that's really important from our perspective. And then I think some of the discussion around these points, especially around recognizing that there is value in data sharing as well as the risks of data sharing, and recognizing how those different opportunities and risks can emerge over time, I think is really important. And one of the exercises that we often do with actors that collect or manage or administer systems that handle data in particular is to use the frame of data is an extension of the child. And that can be really valuable in kind of clarifying why data responsibility matters, even when you're working on incredibly important and difficult concepts. We work with folks who lead the polio program in Afghanistan, and these people are working on incredibly challenging issues. And whenever the person from New York comes in and has a discussion about data responsibility, it's pretty easy and understandable why they would not necessarily kind of prioritize that. But when you make the point of how it's an extension of the child, and then start to do some exercises that we often organize around what is the child's data footprint. We could imagine doing what is a patient's data footprint, and what are the different systems in play. We often do a kind of whiteboarding exercise where we use a hypothetical child, or we could think about doing this with a patient, where you say, in the case of the child, my child is born and that birth is recorded in X system. Which system is that? Who manages that system? Who has access to that system? Where does that data go? Okay, now I sign my child up for school. Where does that information go? My child gets their inoculations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And very quickly you have a whiteboard filled with data systems, filled with institution factors, and most importantly, filled with question marks, because people don't have a good sense of what this deep data ecosystem is. Whenever you're considering that these are potentially very sensitive and also potentially very valuable types of data streams and data assets that might not be going where they should be going, whether to achieve the value that could be created, or potentially worse, creating new risks. That's something that's really essentially going to be very clarifying in the importance of having that beyond consent, human-centered understanding of the value and risks of data. And then just very quickly, to underline Susan's point around data risks, we do quite a lot of that work as well, and really often hear from folks that the concept that once data is aggregated or once data is statistical in nature, there are no risks. Vehemently argue against for a number of reasons that I won't go into here, but just to underline that, I feel that's a really important point as well. So this is Andrew, and I'm done speaking.
Thank you so much, Andrew. So many good points, and I think just echoing so much of what still needs to be resolved, and I think there continues to be some core first steps that I think we need to take, both from that bottoms up frame and also from the top down. Ramesh, I see that you're waiting. I want to give you an opportunity to ask a question or make a comment. The mic is yours. This is Elizabeth. I'm done speaking for now.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I got onto this call because I'm in the tech data industry. I heard a bunch of earlier comments about the use of tech for helping regulate, in some sense, data, the use of data. So my little company essentially helps organizations use the data that they have more effectively internally without accidentally spilling data, confidential data, over to others. Given the trends of data lakes, tech actually is moving in the opposite direction of what I heard in this conversation. Essentially, tech is making sure that companies that have access to different types of data can aggregate them into a data lake, mine it more efficiently, and use it in much more broader ways than we can even imagine right now. I think that's the only point I wanted to make. So I think relying on tech is not essentially not a good bet. It's taking people in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I think you get wild agreement from this panel. I'll leave it to folks to flash their mics if you agree with what's been said. Yeah, Ramesh, I think we recognize that this is, finding a trend, and so the question becomes, how to create the necessary, both directions, bottom up, top down, mechanisms to start to equalize some of the big tech prowess in this domain. So no doubt. All right, I want to give it to our panel. We're at that time in our program where we're in the lightning round of final comments and what's needed, what's next. Recognizing that we've exposited more questions than answers, but there have been some compelling suggestions in this discussion. So I'm going to go around the room in no particular order, just as I see you. So David, I'd love to turn the mic to you first for your closing remarks.
Sure. So thank you again for this panel. It's been great. I wish we had more time. I think the most viable, immediate thing we can do is demand transparency from, as some have suggested already, because I think it would be revealing for a lot of people the degree and value of data that is transacted without people really understanding or knowing it. Now, from my corner of the world, genomic data is being bought and sold by large testing companies to the tune of what we think is hundreds of millions of dollars, but there's not a lot of transparency. Knowing what the value of your genomic data would be would give you a lot of insight into how you might conceive of your rights to that data, and I think we should start there. Thank you. This is David. I'm done.
Thank you, David. I'd love to turn the floor next to Linda, closing remarks.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I have to echo David and Susan too, that one of the things that we need to do is enforce or create some sort of transparency in terms of the data collection and how it's being used, because it's a bit of a black box right now. We have some ideas, we have some ideas, but we need to know more before we can even necessarily define the issue. And there's distinctions to be made between data privacy, ownership, because there is information people would like to keep private, but acknowledging the response of some of the, the woman who is on Social Security and other patients who want to contribute data, but also want to make sure that they're being valued for it or having some sort of value to it. So that is pretty much a wrap for me. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Linda. I appreciate that. All right, so next I see on my screen Parker, closing remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Elizabeth. This is Parker. Today's conversation has been fascinating to listen to. A couple of the big takeaways for me are the fact that we do have to approach data privacy from two perspectives, top down and bottom up. Otherwise, it's like a lock without a key. It doesn't do anybody any good. Another thing that I think is very important to take away from today's conversation is incentivizing people to use their data. There are some ethical concerns and considerations around incentives and appropriate incentives, which might be worth another conversation at another time. But this has been an excellent conversation today. I appreciate the opportunity to participate. This is Parker. I'm done speaking.
Thank you so much, Parker. Christine, the mic is yours.
Sure. So I have two comments really quick as I close. As a patient first, I don't want ownership of my data. I want digital rights to my data so that I can give it to people, so that I can get it freely, so that I can charge people, whatever it is. But if I have ownership, I am under the assumption that somebody is going to try and buy that from me, and then I will lose out again. But the second point that I wanted to make is we really need to establish the same value for these data sets and really across the board, and including patients in that as a vested participant in this process. So really just getting that same value, because you have startup companies now using hashtags to find patients, which is going to hurt everything that we built in with the regulations in pharma. So really just a way to even that out. And I'm Christine, my perspective.
Thank you, Christine. Andrew, the mic is yours.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Very quickly, I think that two final thoughts from my end are, I mentioned this concept of a data life cycle, and we often make the argument that data is treated as a thing when it's often really a process. So I think that an appropriate and fit-for-purpose type of data responsibility approach really needs to recognize what an end-to-end data responsibility approach would constitute. So that is recognizing from the initial planning or implementation of a data system or data collection effort, the collecting stage, the processing and storage, sharing, analyzing, and using different opportunities and risks and inappropriate or appropriate type of activities can happen at each stage of that. So having that full-scale, end-to-end type of understanding is really essential. And then one thing that I wanted to mention very briefly on the incentives piece is that we've done some work on building a social license for data sharing in the context of COVID-19. And one of the important things that we really recognized in our consultations with folks was that there is an incentive to share data and to become what we term as data visible. But there also can be incentives to remaining data invisible. So when we were discussing this COVID-19 work, one of the communities that we were really thinking about was undocumented immigrants in New York City and their incentives for being represented in data sets to gain access to services or have their experiences feeding into decision making from an institutional perspective, but also that clear incentive for remaining data invisible and not having a potential added scrutiny placed on them beyond what is already the case. So recognizing that kind of dual nature and the incentives of both being represented and not being represented, I think is really important if institutions are going to effectively build a social license and appropriate ways of collecting, analyzing, and using data. Thanks so much. This is Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. Alice, the mic is yours.
Oh, I'm just in closing, I would say that I think we do well to look outside the U.S. for solutions. It's highly, in my mind, that they're much more likely to solve this issue of digital human rights and functional health data transfer for the value of society a lot sooner than the U.S. is very hampered by our addiction to monetizing health data. So, and then if there are attorneys that are aware of bad actors, I'd ask them to, please feel free to reach out to me because I have some IP that might be able to result in a cease and desist for those entities. Thanks. And I'm also done speaking.
Thanks so much, Alice. I appreciate that. Sylvie, I would love to turn the mic to you.
Thank you. It's been a great discussion. I've learned a lot. And I would say as my 3 takeaways, there's one, obviously, it's time to move on from ownership. I'm so done with hearing talk of ownership in relation to data. It's old and people think it gives them control, but it does not. The other thing is, yes, we do need regulation, but we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach to data governance. People have different aspirations, different attitude to risk. So what do? Well, we don't only worry about individuals, we also worry about groups, because when it comes to data, individuals are actually not the most significant actors, it's groups. And that's where I go back to this bottom-up empowerment mechanism. We need ways of allowing people to get together and pull together the rights they have. And I hope that in the US soon it won't be limited to California, that you have rights over your data. And I'll start with that.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your comments, Sylvie. Next, I'd like to turn the mic to Cody for your closing remarks.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me on. Great conversation, really learned a lot here. I just wanted to, I agree with, I think, most of what everyone's been saying. I think that kind of needing both the bottom-up and the top-down piece. I think that the top-down governmental piece is really driven by kind of the bottom-up sentiments, or it should be eventually. It's kind of driven by the bottom-up sentiments of people. I think that we need to be telling better stories about what is going on with our data, really fleshing out just how kind of insidious data collection is, data manipulation is, data reselling and selling is. I think that we've done a poor job of really defining kind of what's going on in terms of how data is collected, how it's being used to, and ultimately it's being used to make you a more predictable person and make you a more monetizable person. And so that's kind of what's systematically happening in these big tech companies that already have all the talent and have all the incentives to just further and better hone in better methods of kind of monetizing each person's unique psychology. So I think that in order to get people on the same page and understanding what's going on so that then legislation can kind of come from that, I think that we need to be telling more, just better stories about what's going on. And so I hope to do that. But thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much, Gil, or Cody, sorry. I really appreciate your comments. And Gil, the mic is yours.
Great, thanks so much. And I'm happy to follow up right after Cody, who's doing so much work to make sure that anything that we're doing at the federal level and on the Hill is even possible in the first place. And so many great folks who are doing so much to stimulate the conversation, which is my big takeaway point, is that that we continue to raise the issue, continue to put this on the table as urgent, and I don't think it's hyperbolic to begin talking about this crisis, especially when you look at how much money, or how much profit, folks have made in this pandemic as we shift radically towards, a future that is inescapable from tech and these firms who, we know will weaponize our data against us. And there's a lot of work to do, but we're here doing it, and that's really encouraging to me. And I hope that we're all encouraged by how far we've gotten, even just in the last few months together. So I hope that we continue to connect after this, and I'm looking forward to more conversations.
Thanks very much, Gil. And Chris, I don't know if you wanted to say any closing remarks. I know you joined a little late, but if you have anything, please feel free to take yourself off mute and make a comment.
Sure, thanks. I'll keep it really short, and what Gil and Cody said was essentially what I wanted to say. We live in a very convenient world in 2021. I mean, we have everything at a push of a button at our fingertips, and rightfully so. Like, even when you're playing video games, for those who have played video games, I mean, most of the games that are coming out now are free to play games. I just always remember, if things are free, I mean, my mother always taught me, nothing in life is free. So when things are actually free, just be aware that you might actually be, the product sometimes for a lot of these tech companies. Data is one of those things where we're not going to be able to escape from it. And then, like Gil said, as we move towards more advancements, towards higher technologies and artificial intelligence, the need for data, whether that be for big voice or just data in general, good data is going to be very valuable. So, as a consumer, talking about these things, super important. Understanding how your data is dealt to tech companies and what they're doing. These are all things we need to keep talking about. So happy to keep on pushing the fight forward, and thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate the closing remarks. And just as a reminder, Julia is with us on this panel. She's documenting this, and we've got a standing Miro whiteboard that is available for all those that are participating to take a look at and contribute to. So, there's some important pieces on the top down on the policy side that need attention, and those have been exposited here. And there's definitely a need to. I appreciate the telling better stories to activate the bottom up. So. With that, deep thanks to our panelists and our audience, and really appreciate all the thoughtful engagement. I also can't end without saying deep thanks to Julia and Arca for pulling this room together, and also to Julia for helping document the conversation so that what ends up happening in these discussions don't end here, but they actually inform policy and additional work after and in between. So, Julie, now back to you for your closing announcements.
Hi, this is Julie speaking. Thank you so much, everyone, for a really great conversation. In closing, again, I'm Julie Szmyd, Project Manager at Consuli and host for the Streaming Club. And as we wrap, just note that in addition to this room, we host a long COVID and clinical trials room. You can learn more by following our club, Consuli Conversations. Just tap the little greenhouse at the top and be sure to check out what we have coming up. And I definitely encourage everyone to follow all of our moderators, panelists, follow me and Elizabeth to be pinged into our rooms in the future. For any direct questions, comments, feedback, suggestions, if you'd like to be connected to anybody, I love hearing from you guys. So you can find my email in my bio, also your social medias, and again, for those that joined during our event after our opening announcements and don't yet know Consuli, broadly, Consuli is a public benefit company with the mission to enable individuals to participate in the data economy. Experts do suggest our individual data is worth $20,000 per year. We help people take control and choose who gets access to and how their personal health information is used, and if and when desired, get them paid for their data and make medicine better. We do this by operating a marketplace for members where we become their agent. Our members receive smart matched individualized offers from us for opportunities, including to participate in clinical trials and data trials. There is no cost to join our movement, and you can learn more about us at consuli.net. That's consuli.net. We look forward to our next Clubhouse discussion. Really great having everyone today. Thank you so much. This is Julie, and I'm done speaking.